Hello and welcome to the video, and today it's time for another Tearlaments guide. In the past I already made a guide for fiends with Tearlaments in the TCG post info, and this video was received pretty well by the community, so I thought it's time for another episode. But this time for Master Duel, which is the only place where you can play kit colors. And I was pretty successful with the deck in Master Duel, so I made the top 500 in the last Duelist Cup, and now the next Duelist Cup is coming. So I think it's a great opportunity to give you my Tearlaments secrets and the combos that I would recommend, so that you can make top 500, top 400 or top 300 in the next Duelist Cup with Tearlaments. And this guide will be very detailed, a very long video, so I decided to split up the guide in 4 parts. First of all, I want to talk about some general ideas and the advantages of this deck. In the second part, I want to explain each combo from my own spreadsheet and explain you how you can beat every hand trip with this deck. In the third part, I want to showcase you games against all of the important meta decks in the current format and show you how you can beat the meta, and discuss some important details for each matchup. And then in the fourth and last part, I want to talk about my own decklist, Tearlaments deck building in general, some tech cards that you could play, and why I decide to not play some cards that you may see in other tier lists. And now, enjoy the guide, I hope you can learn from it. Alright, but first of all, I want to discuss some main questions. Why should you play Tearlaments?
Why?
And I think there are a couple good reasons for playing this deck. For example, it has the strongest engine in the entire game with the highest ceiling, because this deck can break boards going second just with engine. The engine is literally that powerful. And the engine is already pretty restricted by the ban list. So Scheiren is on the ban list, Havnis, Merly is banned, the Millers are banned, the Shufflers are limited, Salik is limited, Kid Carlos is limited, and now Pearl Rhino got banned. And all of that just because the tier engine is that powerful. And going first, you can make 8 or 9 interruptions, and the interruption is pretty layered and resilient against board breakers. You may end on endboards like Rukalos, Baron, Salik, and then you may have a tier name in the hand. So Rukalos can send the tier name in your hand, then you get Kaleidoheart, and then if you have Salik Kaleidoheart, then Kaleidoheart can send another tier name, and then you can fusion summon again into Dragon's Tapelia, and then you have Shufflers in the graveyard. Maybe you have Meta Noise or Crime, or also Fairy Tail Snow. Maybe double a Shuffler, so 8 or 9 interruptions, and the interruption is pretty layered, so it's extremely hard for the opponent to break your entire board with only one board breaker. If the opponent has evenly matched, you have Baron as an Omni Negate. If the opponent has Dark Ruler no more, sure, you can just use Salik, send the Rukalos, Rukalos comes back, and then you have the Rukalos summon Negate live again. And even if the opponent manages to remove all cards on your side of the field, then you have still the Shufflers in the graveyard and Fairy Tail Snow, so still graveyard interruption on top of the interruption that is on the board, which is extremely rough to break for the majority of decks. And the deck is actually pretty consistent in setting up this end board, because you have Reinoheart, which is a 1-card starter, and Zimara, which is also a 1-card starter resulting in Kid Carlos, and with 3 Reinoheart, 2 Zimara, 1 Rota, and 1 Foolish Burl Goods, we have a solid amount of 1-card starters. And what makes Tearlaments so unique and special is the amount of restyling that you have to perform with this deck. It's not a helmet deck like Centurion, where you have always the same 1-card combos and always the same end board no matter which of your 4 starters you open. With Tearlament it's completely different. Yes, you have 1-card starters and 1-card combos, but the end board requires still a lot of restyling, and you always have to figure out which cards you want to search and which end board pieces you want to set up depending on the cards that you mill, which makes the deck overall really fun to play. Also requires lots of skill to pilot, but if you can pilot this deck pretty well, then it's a pretty rewarding deck for skilled players. And in Master Duel specifically, Tearlaments is also one of the best decks under Maxx C, because you can go with your 1-card starters into Kid Carlos, and then Kid Carlos can set up a Salik. And the Kid Carlos mill 5, which is the step in your combo that sets up the most amount of interruptions, also works during the opponent's turn. So you can set up Kid Carlos and Salik, and then during the opponent's turn you could mill a Reinoheart, or a Scheiren, or a Havnis, and then you make Rukalos with those. And maybe you have a Shuffler or Snow on top of that. So with just 1 Reinoheart you get to 1 Salik Negate, Rukalos, and maybe a Shuffler or Fairy Tail Snow. So 1 card could be 3 interruptions under Maxx C, and then you still have your non-engine on top of that. So for example, if you have Droplet or Superpoly or Talents, then it's even harder for the opponent to beat your weak board under Maxx C. But the boards that Tearlaments can set up under Maxx C are most of the time stronger than the majority of endboards of other decks under Maxx C. Because if you play decks like Magnamhut, Ritual Beast or Snake Eye, then you can't do that much under Maxx C. Maybe set up 1 interruption, but that's it. You can't combo extremely crazy. But with Tearlaments you can set up at least 3 interruptions just with 1-card starter. And then if you have additional Tearlaments engine on top of that, for example if you hard draw some of your Tearlaments traps, then those cards become endboard pieces that work under Maxx C and make your endboard even stronger under Maxx C. And in general, this deck, 40 card Tearlaments, can spiral out of control pretty fast with small amount of mills. So for example, if we have Scheiren mill free or Scream mill free, then this mill free can invalidate any amounts of hand traps. So let's assume you start with Reinoheart and Scream. You get hit with Ash Blossom on the Scream, Veiler on the Reinoheart, and now you have to pass on this setup into the opponent's turn. But this setup can be still really dangerous, because the mill free from Scream could hit a Reinoheart or a Scheiren, and then you can make hit colors during the opponent's turn, and this could become a Rook-Colors. So you may still end on a Rook-Colors during the opponent's turn, and you might have your non-engine or Tearlaments traps on top of that. And keep in mind the opponent has only 4 cards in the hand, because the opponent hand trapped you twice with Ash Blossom and Veiler. And I had a couple of games that went like that, so opponent hand trapped me, then during the opponent's turn Scream mill free, and Scream completely escalated, milled a couple of good cards, and then bam, game over immediately. Opponent rage quitted. And this is why I love 40 card tier so much. It's consistent, it can play well under Maxx C, and mill freeze can just invalidate any amount of hand traps, because the density of good mills in your deck is so high. This deck is stacked with good mills, but not only with good mills. Most of the cards in 40 card tier are also good to draw or good to mill. And in the background you can see my own Tearlaments deck list, which I use to get not only to Master 1, but to top 5% global in rating duels for 4 months in a row. And I honestly think you can do the same with this deck after watching my combo guide. I will explain my own tech choices in Tearlaments deck building later in the video, after I showed you the combos and the replays against meta decks, because then you will understand my own card choices much better. I already prepared the spreadsheet featuring the most important combos that you should know as a Tearlaments player, and I will go over the major combos from the spreadsheet in this video. And the link to the spreadsheet will be in the video description. And by the way, this spreadsheet is completely free, you don't have to pay any money to watch my combos. However, if you still want to support my channel, feel free to like, comment and subscribe. That helps me a lot, because I want to hit 500 subscribers before the end of this year, so I appreciate any help that I can get. Also, check out my Patreon, link is in the video description. And now let's go to the combos. So let's look into a few selected combos that you should know when you want to play this deck. Here is the Reinoheart 1-card combo everyone should know. So we have Reinoheart, and then we normal summon the Reinoheart, send the Havness, we always send Havness, because Havness is at 1 and Scheiren is at 2. So we want to foolish the Havness first and then hit Scheiren later with our random bills. And then we fuse into Kid Carlos. And then we use the Kid Carlos effect to foolish the tier cache from the deck directly. We could also add the tier cache to the hand, but we absolutely want to foolish the tier cache to get a graveyard effect, which says mill 2 cards. And now we mill 2 with the tier cache, and then Kid Carlos, summon tier cache, send Kid Carlos. And then in a new chain, Kid Carlos chaining 1, mill 5 cards, tier cache chaining 2, mill 3 cards. And it's always important that you use Kid Carlos as a chaining 1 and tier cache as a chaining 2, just in case the opponent has Ash Blossom in hand and the opponent decides to hold the Ash Blossom for later in the combo for some odd reason. And now we milled 8 cards, and with 8 mills we should hit a couple good cards, for example Scheiren. You always want to hit Scheiren later in the combo, then you can use Scheiren to make the Rook-Colors, but you can also make a pretty solid end board with other cards that you might mill. So let's see what we can do with the cards that we milled here. And for this combo we assume that we have a tier card in the hand, which makes Reinoheart a legal activation. So we use Scheiren chaining 1, Reinoheart chaining 2, Scream chaining 3 and Trick Clown chaining 4, chain blocking the Scream against Ash Blossom. So Reinoheart summon, and then we put Scheiren and Kid Carlos back to make the Rook-Colors. And then in a new chain, I forgot to resolve the Salik, but we are obviously going to trigger the Salik here and then search a tier monster. So Salik, search Havness. Yeah, and then after we search Havness, after sending Salik, we go for the Strudo. So the Strudo on the Trick Clown, and now the Strudo is a level 3 tuner. And with a level 3 tuner and the level 7 non-tuner, we make Baron de Fleur. And then we can overlay into Redoer. And now we have lots of interruption with this end board. This doesn't seem that much, but just look what we can do during the opponent's turn. So in the standby phase we can attach one card from the opponent's deck. If it's a monster, it doesn't really matter. If it's a spell, then we get one draw. And if it's a trap, for example Imperm, which is free in most decks, then we get one additional interruption, because we can use the effect of Redoer to detach a trap and place one face-up card from the opponent back to the deck. And now it depends on what the opponent does, and we can adapt our own plays depending on the plays of the opponent. So for example, if the opponent uses a monster effect on the field, then we can chain Havness. And by the way, The opponent cannot attack over Havness by battle because Root Colors has the effect other aqua monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. So if the opponent thinks, oh, I will just attack with my Pydra over the Havness, and then the opponent doesn't have the Havness as a Root Color sent anymore, the opponent completely missed this protection effect of the Root Colors and we can just keep the Havness on the board. So we can mill 3 cards, doesn't really matter what we mill here, but just in case we mill anything that we can send for Reinoheart, it's making the end board a little bit better because then we have the redo as a quick effect tag out and the quick effect Kaleidoheart whenever we want. So adding back a couple of cards that we milled, and now we can use the redo effect at any point of time during the opponent's turn. For example, the opponent goes Barrier of the Voiceless voice activation. And then we can go redo, and then redo it, attach the Reinoheart. Reinoheart comes back. And then we send a tier card from the hand, the Meta Noise or the Tier Cache. And then we Foolish the Scheiren. And then we can use Scheiren effect. And we should have another Aqua in the graveyard. Yes, we have the Simar in the graveyard. That means we can make Kaleidoheart. And now Kaleidoheart, spin whatever the opponent has. For example, the Barrier of the Voiceless voice. And then if the opponent has any card that special summons, then we can just negate it with Root Colors. And Havness effect, and we can use the Havness and the Root Colors to make it Regostapelia. And Regostapelia is another monster negate, Baron de Fleur is an Omni negate, and we still haven't used our Shuffler in the graveyard. So many interruptions just with one Reinoheart. And I think this is a great showcase what you can accomplish with just one single Reinoheart and one tier card in the hand that you can send for a Reinoheart later in the combo. So we have Omni negate, Summon negate, Spin, Monster negate, Graveyard Shuffle, and Tier Cache as a follow-up. So 5 interruptions plus follow-up with just one single Reinoheart. And just keep in mind, we could have 3 non-engine on top of that. 3 non-engine cards. So just imagine this endboard plus Droplet, Superpoly or Talents. This is absolutely disgusting for the opponent and it's most of the time just game if you get this far. And now let's go into the next combo, the anti-Maxx C combo. So we start with Reinoheart again. We already scouted for Ash Blossom with the Road R. And then we send Havness. And here we get hit with the Maxx C. For most of the decks this is just game over, but not for us. We can just make it Carlos as usual and then set up an endboard to play during the opponent's turn. So get Carlos, and now one step that is really important. Most of the players tell you to search Salik, but I tell you do not search Salik. Use the Kid Carlos effect to send the Scream directly from your deck, and then we use Scream effect to search the Salik. And it's really important to deck find as much as possible if you want to go for the Kid Carlos Salik pairs, because you want to maximize your chances of hitting a Scheiren, Havness or Reinoheart during the opponent's turn when you mill 5 cards with the Kid Carlos. So we do not search Salik directly, we use the Scream to search the Salik and deck find by 1 card. Keep that in mind. And this is a difference between a casual and a pro tier player, so pro tier players will try to deck find if possible. And then, after resolving Kid Carlos, we go Talents, look at the opponent's hand, remove the best card, for example the starter, or the non-engine that beats our end board and then the opponent is completely screwed. So most of the times we end with Kid Carlos, Salik, which is already 1 interruption that deals with any monster effect the opponent could activate on the field. Then we could high roll into Root Colors, which deals with 1 special summon, and then we could also have Meta Noise or Crime. And this end board, which doesn't seem really impressive, can still be really oppressive against the opponent because we have Monster Negate and then a potential Root Colors, and then Root Colors can send the Salik. And then with Salik we have Follow Up, and we hand trap the opponent for 1 card, and we could also hard roll the Meta Noise, and with Meta Noise we have 1 Book of Moon and Regostapelia. So those 3 cards are already 4 interruptions during the opponent's turn, 4 interruptions, and that may be enough to stop a couple of decks. Alright, when discussing Maxx C, I want to address a different issue. Currently we have this game state. We started with Race Off, grabbed the Fenrir, and now after we added Fenrir the opponent is going to drop a Maxx C. And the question is, should we special summon Fenrir or not? And my opinion on that would be, yes, you should special summon Fenrir. So first of all, with Fenrir we get the Tier Cache. And Tier Cache means follow up, but it could also become additional interruption during the opponent's turn if we mill into Shufflers or Fairy Tale Snow. So even though we give the opponent 1 Maxx C draw by special summoning Fenrir under Maxx C, we might end up with 2 interruptions under Maxx C, and the opponent gets to draw only 1 card. But the opponent could also top deck dead cards with the Maxx C, for example a second normal summon. And we get 1 guaranteed interruption with the Fenrir plus 1 potential second interruption with the Fenrir. Second reason would be second summoning, so just assume we go normal summon Reinoheart with this hand, and yes, with this hand you should go normal summon Reinoheart over the Simara. So we summon Reino just in case we get ashed, we still have the Meta Noise which wouldn't work if we normal summon the Simara instead. And here we can use the Seamara in the hand as a fusion material for the kit colors. So put Halfness and Seamara back to the bottom of the deck, make it colors. And now kit colors. Foolish the Scream, search the Salik. And by the way, sometimes you may consider to search Crime over Salik here, because if the opponent has cards like Heavy Storm or Happy's Feather Duster, then those would wipe out our entire back row, but with the Crime we can negate it, and we have Tearkash as a Crime discard, so Crime is live. And resolving the mill 5 from Kit Carlos is not that important, because we still get the Rook colors with the Meta Noise. But here we have the Fenrir, which is able to beat Sunken Summoning, and without the Fenrir, both Meta Noise and Salik and Droplet would be completely dead against Sunken Summoning. But if the opponent goes Sunken Summoning, then normal summon Pydra, then Fenrir can banish the Sunken Summoning, and now the Pydra is vulnerable against the Meta Noise and Salik. And third reason to drop Fenrir under Maxx C would be buy steals, so Fenrir can just punish any buy steals for banishing them face down after the opponent decides to use buy steals on our tier girls. And now I want to show you a combo that uses buy steal Magnamhut as a 1-card starter, but it only works going second if the opponent plays a deck with light or dark monsters. So let's say we play against Voiceless Voice. The opponent starts with low, and then low into Barrier, and then Barrier into Saphira, and then Saphira. And we could drop the Magnamhut here, so we decide to drop the Magnamhut here, and the opponent doesn't have any extension, then Magnamhut effect to search during the end phase. In the end phase, we add this Trudeau. And now during our turn, we use this Trudeau on the Magnamhut. And then we go into Deep Sea Prima Donna, and then we use Deep Sea Prima Donna to add back the Saphira to the opponent's hand. So add the Saphira to the opponent's hand, and then summon a Seamara directly from the deck. And then Seamara, send the Halfness, and then we go into Kit Carlos, and now Kit Carlos, search Reinoheart, and then Kit Carlos, take out into Reinoheart, Kit Carlos chaining 1, Reinoheart chaining 2 because we want to send the Scheiren first before we commit to 5 random mills, and it's better to take out the Scheiren before we mill 5 cards. So Foolish the Scheiren and then mill 5 random cards. In this case we had Meta Noise and Tearkash, so we mill 2 additional cards and we can add back the Tearkash. So the other mills don't really matter because we go for game, and then whatever follow up we have doesn't really matter because the game is just over. So here we make Psychic and Punisher. And then battle phase, pump up the Psychic and Punisher, attack with the Rook colors first. And then attack with 7500, BAM! Game. Yeah, and this is how you get to Kit Carlos and to an OTK going second just with 1 buy steal Magnamhut. I don't think that Magnamhut is worth main decking right now, but it could be a main deck consideration in the future, for example if we get Fiendsmith. And by the way, let's talk for a short moment about the different methods how Prima Donna could become live. So Prima Donna requires 1 card in the opponent's banish pile, and there are different methods to get 1 card in the opponent's banish pile. So for example, Fire King Snake Eye might start with the Wanted poster, and then Wanted might banish itself to return the OSS to draw a card, and then Wanted is in a banish pile, we can return the Wanted with the Prima Donna and then OTK the opponent with the Prima Donna and Punisher line. Or if we play against Snake Eye Fire King, the opponent might also go into IP Masquerena and then IP into SP, and SP will banish itself and 1 card from us. So the SP might be in a banish pile really often, but Snake Eye Fire King might also have Emblerway in a banish pile at some point in the combo, and we could return the Emblerway to the extra deck and then OTK the opponent with the Prima Donna and Punisher line. If we play against Yubel, then Yubel might have the Grave Skirmer in a banish pile, and we could return the Grave Skirmer to OTK the opponent with the Prima Donna. Also, Yubel might have the Yama in the banish pile, and we could return the Yama. If we play against Tyr, then Tyr might have the Trivikama in the banish pile or one of the Shufflers, and we can return those cards, OTK the opponent with Prima Donna. If we play against Voiceless Voice, Voiceless Voice is going to banish their own Saphira to ritual summon the Skull Guardian, and then Saphira will remain in the banish pile. And if we play against Centurion, then Centurion might end up with the Blazer Dragon in the banish pile. Yeah, and I think those are the most common cards that you will see in the banish piles of the meta decks. But the opponent could also play cards like Crossout Designator on Maxx C and then banish the Maxx C, and then the opponent has a Maxx C in the banish pile that you could return, or Ash Blossom if you play Ash Blossom and the opponent crossouts your Ash Blossom, or if the opponent crossouts the talents, then those cards will be in the banish pile and you can return them for the Prima Donna. And decks like Voice might also play Extravagance, which banishes 6 extra deck cards, and in the past they played Prosperity, but now Prosperity is banned, so only Extravagance will remain, and Extravagance will banish extra deck cards in the future that you could return for the Prima Donna. And keep in mind, this line works with any monster that you can normal summon in this Trudo. So even if you bricked on a garbage hand like this, you can still educate the opponent with a hand like that. We just normal summon the Maxx C, and then we go to Strudo on the Maxx C, so the Strudo as a level 5 tuner, and then we go into Prima Donna, and then Prima Donna return whatever is banished, cards banished by the Extravagance, Shovelers, Trivikama, whatever. So return any of those cards, and then we go into Seamaurer, and then Seamaurer send the Halfness, and then Kid Carlos. Yeah, and now into Reinoheart, and we make the Rukalos just to protect ourselves against Nibiru. And Rukalos, yeah, and now we have like End Punish alive. We could also hit a Trick Clown, and then we should be in a range where Psychic End Punisher is big enough to OTK the opponent. And we can reduce our own life points even further by banishing a monster, for example the Trick Clown, or just anything else. And then we are at 3000 life points, the opponent is at 8000, that means we gain 5000 attack. So 5000 attack means 8500 attack, and if we have 6000 difference, then we have 9500 attack. So one punch with 9500, GG. Now let's look into the 2-card combos. And here we have the 2-card combo Scheiren plus Reinoheart. And I would recommend to start with the Reinoheart. So Reinoheart send Havness, and then Havness make it Carlos using the Reinoheart on the board. If we have Superpoly in the hand, the line might be a little bit different, but right now we focus on a line with just Reinoheart and Scheiren. And here we use the Kid Carlos effect to add the Tearcash to the hand. We do not want to foolish the Tearcash yet. So instead we use the Scheiren effect in the hand, and then Scheiren send the Tearcash from our hand. And then we get to mill 3 with the Scheiren, and then we get to mill 2 more with the Tearcash. So here we hit a Scream, that means we can add the Salik, and we get Carlos, summon the Tearcash, send itself, get Carlos chaining 1, Tearcash chaining 2, and we mill 8 cards. And we hit this Trudo again, which is what I always want to do, because this Trudo into Baron is just such an amazing endboard. So the Trudo, and now you can see the power of Baron de Fleur, because Baron is able to pop your Scheiren, then Scheiren can fusion summon the Rukalos. So Baron pop Scheiren, and Scheiren into Rukalos. And then we have still the 3V Karma, and with 3V Karma we can search either the Meta Noise or the Crime. And then we can use the 3V Karma to search either the Meta Noise or the Crime if we have a monster in the hand. And this endboard is already extremely strong, but it could be much better if we just milled a Shuffler here. But we have Fairy Tail Snow, and Fairy Tail Snow is a Book of Moon during the opponent's turn. So that should be more than enough interruptions to win the game usually. And keep in mind this was just with 2 cards, Reinoheart and Scheiren. So we should have 3 additional cards in our hand that could be extenders or non-engine in addition to the endboard. Okay, so far we discussed only the combos against 0 hand traps, but now let's think how we want to beat hand traps in the opponent's hand. Currently the most popular hand traps in Master Duel are Maxx C and Ash Blossom. And I think the best approach to beat both of those hand traps is by starting with the Reinoheart if we have Reinoheart and Scheiren. So you don't want to start with the Scheiren and then get hit with a Maxx C on the Scheiren effect in the hand. You can play much better into Maxx C if you go Reinoheart first. But let's also think about Ash Blossom. The opponent could use the Ash on the Scheiren or on the Kid Carlos. And let's say the opponent decides to not use the Ash Blossom on the Scheiren and wait with the Ash Blossom for Kid Carlos. Then your Kid Carlos gets negated and you might not have any follow up after that. So it's just better to start with the Reinoheart, get a hit with Ash Blossom on the Reinoheart, and then use Scheiren as an extender. So Scheiren, discard any monster, mill 3 cards and see what we mill. We could mill a second Scheiren here, but that would be pretty lucky. Let's assume we just mill anything and not another Scheiren. So for example Trick Clown, but it doesn't really matter because we will go into Redoer and then Redoer into Kid Carlos, and then with Kid Carlos we get to mill 5 cards and we should get some endboard with the mill 5 from Kid Carlos. So Redoer here, detach Scheiren for card effect, and now we get to fusion summon with the Scheiren. And in this case we already have the Tearcash in the hand, that means we don't have to search the Tearcash. We could either go for the Tearcash or for the Grief. So Grief is our extender which allows us to foolish Havness at the end of the combo just in case we don't hit Havness with the mill 8. But right now we mill 8 cards. And keep in mind, always get Carlos chaining 1, Tearcash chaining 2. And here we hit a Heartbeat, Havness, Shuffler, Destrudo, so lots of good mills. So we use Havness to go into Rukalos, which would be the best case, but there are also other lines that you could play. So let's say we didn't mill Salik early in the combo, then we could use Baronifleur, pop the Salik, search the Havness, and then with the Fairy Tail Snow and Reclown make Dugaris draw 2, discard Havness, and this would be another way to get into Rukalos. But right now we could just use the Grief, summon Reinoheart, send the Rukalos, Rukalos comes back, and then we can make a Dweller or Dugaris, depending on how we want to build up the end board. Okay, let's cover the next 10 trap, Imperm, and if we have Reinoheart and Grief, we can easily beat Imperm. So we start with the Reinoheart, and if you play against a decent player, then the opponent will not Imperm the Reinoheart, the opponent will hold the Imperm for the kit colors, which is the spot where you should Imperm the tier deck. So let's assume we are playing against an opponent with a brain and not a trash can duelist, so the opponent will Imperm the kit colors and not the Reinoheart, or we can also play true Imperm on kit colors. And we do that by going for Grief for Scheiren and then send kit colors, and it's really important that we go for Scheiren here, because we can use the Scheiren combined with any level 4 body to go into Redoer, and then use Redoer to attach Scheiren to get into Rukalos. But first of all we resolve Kit Kalos mill 5. And for this combo let's just assume we have already a tier card in the hand, that we can activate the Reinoheart. In this case we milled both Reinoheart and Scream, that means we can go Reinoheart Chaining 1, Scream Chaining 2. So Scream allows us to search the Salik. And then we go Reinoheart, and then Reinoheart can discard the Salik that we just searched. And now Salik can search the tier cache. And now we can go for the tier cache, banish the Scream, and then mill 3 cards. We could hit a Destrudo here, and then we can go for Baronifleur, pop the Scheiren. And while we have Scheiren on the board, the opponent is in an awkward position because the opponent cannot drop Nibiru without triggering the Scheiren. So if the opponent wants to throw a Nibiru before we get to Baronifleur, then the opponent is triggering our Scheiren. Anyways, we just mill the Scheiren here with the random mill 3 from the tier cache, so we can use this Scheiren to go into Rukalos. And now we are protected against Nibiru. And now we could go either for the Redoer or for the Dugaris. In this case we have a really nice Dugaris line. And the line is to go for the draw 2, discard 1, and then we chain it Trivikama. So Trivikama to search Heartbeat, and then draw 2 cards, discard the Heartbeat. And now Heartbeat allows us to add back the Salik that we just discarded for the Reinoheart earlier. And then we link those two off for SP Little Knight, and now we just pass on Salik, Crime, Rukalos, SP, Superpoly, Snow, and Modora. So that's like 7 interruptions, and we have follow up because Rukalos can send the Salik, and then Salik can search another Reinoheart. And this is how we beat Imperm on Kit Carlos if we have Reinoheart plus Grief. And now let's cover another combo with Grief. The combo works with Tier Cache, Fenrir or Raze-Off plus Grief. So it doesn't matter if we have Raze-Off or Fenrir or Tier Cache directly, we just want to search the Tier Cache and have the Tier Cache in our hand. And now with the Tier Cache in the hand we go for Grief, and then summon Reinoheart, send the Reinoheart. And then in a new chain, Reinoheart Chaining 1, Tier Cache Chaining 2. Banish the Grief, summon the Tier Cache, summon the Reinoheart. And then in a new chain, Tier Cache Chaining 1, Reinoheart Chaining 2. So we want to send the Havness first, and then mill 3 random cards. And now we mill 3 random cards after we already took the Havness out of our deck. And then we trigger the Havness to fusion summon into Kit Colors. And here, if you don't mill another tier monster that you could use as a fusion material for Kit Colors, then you have to decide which card you want to use as a fusion material. You can use either the Tier Cache or the Reinoheart, but I would prefer to use the Reinoheart because we want to keep the Tier Cache on the board for Baronifleur later in the combo. So we make Kit Colors here, and now Kit Colors can search the Scheiren, and now with the Destrudo we have pretty nice combos. So Destrudo on the Reinoheart, summon as a level 3 tuner. And now the opponent is in an awkward position, so if the opponent wants to drop a Nibiru here, then we get to trigger the Tier Cache and the Kit Carlos to mill. And if the opponent doesn't drop a Nibiru, then we can make Baronifleur, and Baronifleur is a negate against Nibiru. And now Kit Carlos can summon the Scheiren, and then we mill 5 cards. Yeah, and then you just combo from here and build up a solid end board. And now you have Scheiren, and you can make Rukalos with Redoer detaching Scheiren, and then mill 3 with the Scream, and after we mill 3 cards with the Scream we can go Baronifleur, pop the Scream, assuming we didn't mill a Scream yet, and then Scream can search a trap. Really important combo that you should always keep in mind: if you have the option to search with Karma, then you should prioritize to search the Scream and then pop the Scream later with Baronne Fleur. By doing that, you get 3 additional mills, and that could help you to set up your graveyard even further for cards like your Fairy Tale Snow or Ishizu Shufflers. And that will be a basic end board for Fenrir or Tearkash plus Grief, and here we have 7 interruptions. Yeah, 7 interruptions with just 2 cards is really strong. And you should always keep in mind that it's better to summon the Tearkash instead of sending the Tearkash from the hand to summon the Reinoheart, because by doing that you get 1 additional mill and 1 body that could be important for Baronne Fleur later in the combo. Okay, now let's look into Reinoheart Scream. So the question is, how should you order your chainings when you have both Reinoheart and Scream? And I would recommend to go Scream chaining 1, Reinoheart chaining 2 if you have an extender. So if we have an extender, we can send the Havness first and then mill 3 random cards that can't be Havness, which increases the chance for good Screamers, because Havness can't be in the deck anymore when we mill 3 with the Scream. However, the downside of this is that it plays into Ash Blossom, and if we get hit with Ash Blossom on a Reinoheart, then we are pretty much cooked, unless we have an extender. But if we have an extender, like Grief or Foolish Burial, then this is perfectly fine. Another consideration that you have to make is Ghost Ogre, because if you go Reinoheart 1, Scream chaining 2, the opponent may respond with Ghost Ogre on the Scream, pop your Scream and deny your mill 3. You still get to search a tear trap with the Scream, but you rather want to resolve the Scream mill 3 and maybe hit another Scream with the mill 3, and then you can also search a tear trap. But if the opponent decides to Ash Blossom the Reinoheart, then we still have a small chance to randomly hit a Scheiren or a Havness with the Scream mill 3, and then we go into Kid Carlos. And this happened for me a couple of times, and the opponent just rage quitted the game because we still ended on Kid Carlos with the Scream mill 3. And in this case, you won't even need the extender because you already got to Kid Carlos with the Scream mill 3. And those are the reasons why I suggest to go Scream chaining 1, Reinoheart chaining 2. It's better if the opponent doesn't have any hand traps, it's better against Ghost Ogre, and it's also good if the opponent ashes the Reinoheart and we get lucky with the Scream mills. Okay, in one of the previous combos I already talked about Reinoheart Scheiren plus Superpoly. So here I suggest to normal summon Reinoheart, because we want to use the Sea Mara in our hand as a fusion material. And now we have Kid Carlos and Reinoheart. If the opponent wants to hit us with an Imperm on a Kid Carlos, we can just chain Superpoly and fuse the Kid Carlos plus the Reinoheart into Rook Carlos. And Rook Carlos requires as fusion material Tearlaments Kid Carlos plus 1 Tearlaments monster. And this wouldn't work if we normal summon the Sea Mara here. For this reason we should probably normal summon the Reinoheart instead. So we can dodge the Imperm on Kid Carlos, which is the biggest choke point for this deck, and then Kid Carlos hits the graveyard. We resolve the Kid Carlos search and we get to mill 5 cards with the Kid Carlos. And now we can resolve the Scheiren. And then we make Rego Stapelia, we get to search the Salik, and now we can still go into Grief, Grief summon Tearkash, send Rook Carlos comes back, we mill with Tearkash, and then we have 2 buddies that we can link into SP Little Knight. And for the next combo we want to look at combinations of hand traps, for example Ash plus Imperm. And currently, both Ash and Imperm are really popular hand traps, so you may expect combinations of them in the hand of the opponent. And this hand should be able to play through Ash and Imperm, but we have to sequence our plays correctly. So we start with the Reinoheart, check for Ash Blossom, and the opponent decides to not Ash Reinoheart, because the opponent has Imperm, and from the opponent's perspective it makes actually lots of sense to Imperm the Kid Carlos instead of ashing the Reinoheart. So we go into Kid Carlos, the opponent hits us with an Imperm. And here I would try to bait out the Ash Blossom first with the Scheiren, and we get hit with the Ash Blossom on the Scheiren. But this is exactly what you wanted to do. Now Ash Blossom is baited and we can go into Grief, so Grief can summon the Scheiren, and then we send Kid Carlos, and Kid Carlos can mill 5 cards. So we mill 5, including a Trick Clown, and Trick Clown is already pretty decent because we can go into Redo, and then Redo can attach Scheiren, and then we get into Rook Carlos. On top of that we have Scream Karma, so we get to search 2 tear traps. So Scream searches the Salik. Then we go into Redoer. Yeah, we can actually go for Redoer here and then discard the Scheiren with the Redoer, draw 2, discard 1. So discard the Scheiren and then make Rook Carlos. Yeah, and now we have a couple of options. So we can search the Crime with the Karma. And now we have Reinoheart for follow up and Modora as a Crime discard. Yeah, we also have talents, which can rip the opponent's hand, and now we have so many cards against 2 remaining cards in opponent's hand. Yeah, that should be more than enough for game, and keep in mind we played through Ash Blossom and Imperm. You just have to know how to sequence your plays correctly against potential hand traps from the opponent. And now let's move to the last combo from a spreadsheet that I want to showcase. So here we have Reinoheart, Scheiren and Destrudo. So lots of engine cards, and we should be able to build a pretty strong end board with them. So we start with the Reinoheart, send Havness, and then Kid Carlos, and now Kid Carlos add the Tier Cache. This hand would also work if we have Tier Cache instead of Scheiren in the hand, then we would just search the Scheiren instead of the Tier Cache. And now it's time to discard the Tier Cache, mill 3 with the Scheiren, mill 2 with the Tier Cache. And then Trick Clown. And then we mill 2 cards with the Tier Cache. Yeah, and we hit the Salik, but that shouldn't really matter. And now Kid Carlos, summon the Tier Cache, send Kid Carlos, mill 8 cards in a new chain. So here we milled a Scream, but we should be able to get to 2 traps with the combo that I want to showcase you right now. So we search the Meta Noise first. And then we go to Strudo on the Scheiren. And then with those 2 we make Baron the Fleur. And then we go Redoer. We do not want to pop the Scheiren with the Baron yet. Here we use the Redoer to detach the Scheiren, and then Scheiren plus the Seamare plus the Reinoheart into Kaleidoheart. And now Baron can pop the Kaleidoheart. And then Kaleidoheart can revive itself, send the Heartbeat from our deck. And now we can use the Heartbeat to add back the Salik or the Crime. So we add back the Crime here. And now we have a pretty solid board against Boardbreaker Tenpai, just in case the opponent won the coin toss and forced us to go first. So double Omni Negate with Baron and Crime can discard the Havness, and Havness equals Root Colors during the opponent's turn. And then Root Colors can send Kaleidoheart, Kaleidoheart can send Scheiren from the deck. And then with Scheiren and Root Colors we make Dragos Tapelia. So tons of interruptions, and this would probably be the end board that I would go for if my opponent forces me to go first and doesn't throw any hand traps on me. And by the way, in the end phase we get Redoer back, and Redoer has the potential to steal a spell from the opponent's deck and then draw 1 card. And then we have a Superpoly discard, which could become a Shuffler. And then we get even more interruptions by Superpoly discarding a Shuffler or Fairy Tale Snow, just in case we don't have Fairy Tale Snow in the graveyard already. And finally, I want to talk about battle positions and zone management. At this point, you may have noticed that I prefer to summon my monsters in the zones 1, 3 and 5, for a very good reason. And the reason for summoning my monsters in those zones is Relinquished Anima, which is a popular card in Purely and Voiceless Voice. And currently, Voiceless Voice is a really popular deck. Purely is a little bit less popular, but still a deck you should keep on the radar. And in the TCG, Linkuriboh is banned, so you see this card over Linkuriboh in any Snake deck. And this card can equip any monsters it points to. So from the opponent's perspective, the monsters that Anima would point to are the monsters in the zones 2 and 4. And we do not want to give the opponent the opportunity to take our monsters with Anima. For this reason we do not want to summon in the zones 2 and 4. At least the monsters that we want to have in the end board. If we summon any monsters in zones 2 and 4 while performing the combo, this is still completely fine. We just need to pay attention that we don't summon any end board pieces in the zones 2 and 4. Because those are the Anima columns and we don't want to play in the Anima columns. Also, with fusion monsters, it's really important that you summon them in the zones 1, 3 or 5 for another reason, and the reason is Cross Sheep. Because you want to have your Cross Sheep pointing to a fusion monster, so that you can use the effect of Cross Sheep to revive. And when it comes to spells and traps, always pay attention that you activate your spells and traps into a column where the opponent has no spell and trap card. Because this card can never be an Imperm column, while any spell and trap column where the opponent has a face down card could be an Imperm column. For this reason we look for unoccupied spell and trap columns, or spell and trap columns where the opponent has already a face up card that cannot be an Imperm, and we want to place our spells and traps in those columns, but I think that should be pretty obvious. And now let's talk about battle positions. You may have noticed that I like to summon monsters with equal attack and defense, for example Fenrir or Kaleidoheart in the defense position, for a very good reason. And this reason is Lightning Storm, because Lightning Storm can only destroy all monsters in attack position. And currently Lightning Storm is really popular in Tenpai Dragon, so you may encounter Lightning Storm pretty often, and we want to play around Lightning Storm if it makes sense to play around Lightning Storm by putting our own monsters into defense position. Another case where we want to summon our high attack monsters in defense position would be the Yubel matchup, and Yubel has Nightmare Pain, which reflects the battle damage. And for this reason, we may consider to summon monsters like Rukalos or Baron de Fleur in defense position when we play against Yubel. But there is one exception to this rule, and the exception would be if you main deck Ash Blossom. Because if you main deck Ash Blossom, you might want to use the effect of Dugaris to skip your next main phase 1 and special summon one monster in defense position. And this could come up if you want to make a Reinoheart, so we could use the effect of Dugaris to revive the Ash Blossom, and then use Tearkash, and make Tearkash and Ash Blossom into Reinoheart. And now we pass, and we enter our next turn. And in the next turn, we don't have a main phase 1. So if the Fenrir is in defense position, we cannot attack with the Fenrir. And for this reason, we want to summon the Fenrir or Kaleidoheart in attack position. Then we can go battle phase, attack, attack. And then in the main phase 2 we can continue assuming the opponent is not dead. And trust me, this will come up. This came up a couple of times for me when I was main decking Ash Blossom and summon Fenrir in defense. And then I realized, oh shit, I'm such a bozo, I had to summon my Fenrir in attack in order to attack in the next battle phase. And now I cannot attack with Fenrir, and with Fenrir it's especially tragic because Fenrir has the effect to banish one card of the opponent on attack declaration. Yeah, and for this reason it's really important to summon Fenrir in attack or Kaleidoheart when you main deck Ash Blossom. And now let's go into some replays against the meta decks. So here we have the first game, and I decided to go first, but it's Tenpai Dragon, so I would have to go first even if I lose the coin toss. And I start with the Scheiren, discard the Hafnis. Because currently this is my only play, and fortunately I hit the 3v Karma. And now I go into Kid Carlos. So Kid Carlos gets hit with an Imperm, which is really unfortunate because Imperm on Kid Carlos is the biggest choke point, much more threatening than Maxx C. But fortunately I have the 3v Karma in my graveyard, and 3v Karma cancels the Grief, which is the best extender that you can play in this deck. So 3v Karma can summon the Scheiren from the deck, and then I can send Kid Carlos. But here is where I get hit with the Maxx C. My opponent decided to not drop the Maxx C on the Scheiren effect just because I could be on Gamma. And Gamma was at 2 when this game was played. So it's a reasonable decision on my opponent's side to not drop the Gamma on the Scheiren effect. So I mill the Scream, and now I can just pass on Scheiren and Sullik. And here I shotgun my own Maxx C, hoping that my opponent doesn't have the Gamma in hand. But my opponent does have the Gamma, which is really unfortunate. Because not only does my own Maxx C not resolve, my opponent can also use those bodies for a Synchro Summon. And my opponent goes for Stardust SL. And here is where I decided to use the Sullik, because otherwise my opponent can set up a Reinoheart, and Reinoheart would be able to negate my Sullik. And then I can send my Scheiren, and Scheiren can fusion summon into Rukalos. And here is where my opponent decided to chain the Genroku, because otherwise Rukalos can just negate the Genroku. So Scheiren resolves. And I get to summon the Rukalos, but now my opponent summoned Pydra, and Pydra allows my opponent to search a Sung and Summoning or send it directly to the field. I could have waited for the Pydra resolution to use Fairy Tail Snow, but it doesn't really matter. And now my opponent should be cooked, because my opponent needs to have Chandra and Kaiman in the hand to beat the Rukalos. If my opponent has only one of them, my opponent loses here. So I can just send the Sullik, get Reinoheart for follow up, and now my opponent loses the game. Yeah, and beating Tenpai Dragon under Maxx C is not just wishful thinking, this can actually happen, and this game would be a perfect example for that. So we go with the Reinoheart into Hafnis again, and then second Kid Carlos, and now we just win the game, and this is the reason why our opponent scooped. And for the next replay, I prepared a game where I had to go second against Snake a Fire King. And I think in general this matchup is pretty fine if you go second, because you have a couple of tools that work against this deck, especially Abyss Dweller. Because Abyss Dweller forces out most of the interruption, otherwise Abyss Dweller is just going to shut down most of the graveyard interruption. And here my opponent started with Poplar into OSS, I chain my Maxx C, and I get hit with Ash Blossom. Which is a little bit unfortunate, but still completely fine. But even if Maxx C doesn't resolve, we have still a couple of tools against this deck, for example our board breakers, like Superpoly, Droplet or Talents, depending on the endboard that they want to go for. And one possible line is the Zombie Vampire line, and Zombie Vampire would heavily benefit us, because milling 4 from a tier deck is just nuts, but for us. But instead the opponent goes for Princess into Flame Birch, and then spell trap zoning IP. And if the opponent would go for Appaloosa endboards, then we have talents which can steal Appaloosa. If the opponent wants to go for endboards that leave 2 or more fire monsters on the board, then we can Superpoly the fire monsters into Mudragon, and Mudragon would shut down the Promethean Princess in the graveyard. But here I start with Scheiren, discard Shuffler, and Scheiren discarding a Shuffler is amazing if the opponent goes for endboards like Ambler Whale with Kirin in hand, because then the Kaldo in the graveyard is going to shut down almost all of the interruption. But here my opponent didn't went for this endboard, my opponent went for an endboard that allows the opponent to add back the Ash Blossom from the graveyard. And I spotted this play, so I decided to chain my Kaldo to shuffle back the Ash Blossom and prevent the opponent from adding back the Ash Blossom. So instead my opponent added back the Garonix, and I'm not sure if that was the correct play. I think my opponent should have added back the Ulcanix instead. So I get to search and then my opponent goes with the IP into SP, and now SP is going to banish my Scheiren. Otherwise I could go for Abyss Dweller here, and Abyss Dweller would shut down the graveyard interruption and the Flamewatch Dragon effect, so also removing the follow-up. So SP banish my Scheiren, and then Poplar, and then Oak, revive back the Ponix, and now my opponent gets even more follow-up. But with all of the follow-up, I have to go for an OTK here, and then the follow-up of my opponent is completely irrelevant, because my opponent will end up with 0 life points. So I go for Grief, and then send the Salik in the hand for Reinoheart. And now chaining 1 Reinoheart, chaining 2 Salik, chaining 3 SP Little Knight, on the Tree Clown, and then chaining 4 Imperm. And I think the reason why my opponent used the SP on the Tree Clown is that Tree Clown could crash into the SP, and then Tree Clown could remove the SP banish interruption. And now I'm left with one thing Reinoheart, but fortunately I have the Destruder in the hand. And here is where you can see that the Destruder is a game changer. So with the Destruder in my hand, I can go for the Primadonna. And the Primadonna, return the banished SP Little Knight back to the extra deck of my opponent, and then summon the Sea Maurer. And now Sea Maurer can dump the Halfness, and with Halfness I can make it Carlos. And now I can start to play with my tier engine. So we go into Kit Carlos here, and now with the Kit Carlos I can finally search a tier cache and then start to mill my deck. But first of all I go into Psychic End Punisher just in case the opponent is on the Nibiru. And now I have less life points than my opponent, so it doesn't matter if my opponent drops the Nibiru on End Punisher. I go for Carlos under Scream, and then revive back the tier cache. And then milling 11 cards in total. I hope that I can mill a Scheiren here, and then I could go for the Rukalos, which would shut down Nibiru, or maybe something else that could put up a body on the board. But I don't hit a Scheiren here, so I have to go for the End Punisher, banishing my own tier cache and island. And this is a really important interaction that you should keep in mind. End Punisher, banish island, breaks the entire board. And now my opponent has 0 bodies, I have 8500 attack on the board. And my opponent knew the Psychic End Punisher is going to one punch them, therefore decided to surrender the game. And for the next replay, I prepared a game where I had to go second against Yubel, and honestly, Yubel is one of the hardest matchups going second. Because all of my board breakers don't work against the main end board like Appaloosa, Phantom, Rage, and Escape of the Unchained. Talent stealing the Appaloosa is most of the times insufficient, and the Droplet might also be insufficient because they still end up with Rage into SP, and that are already 3 interruptions, so I have to hope my opponent ends on a board that plays into Superpoly or uses the Escape of the Unchained pretty early, and then Talents and Droplet would work against the Yubel end board. But even then, it's still pretty rough, because you may not be able to OTK them with the End Punisher when they have Nightmare Pain face up, because they could have a Spirit of Yubel in the hand, and then you have to attack into Spirit of Yubel, take the 8500 battle damage yourself, and then you lose when you try to OTK them with the End Punisher. So in a Yubel matchup, you have to break the board and outgrind them, which is also pretty rough, considering they have follow up with the Spirit Gates, Nightmare Pain, and the second Phantom in the extra deck most of the times. But here, fortunately, my opponent played into Superpoly, so I can Superpoly their board into Garura. I then try to bait the Phantom with Scheiren, but my opponent doesn't accept the bait, so I mill a couple of cards and now I have to chain block against the Phantom. But fortunately for me this is pretty easy here because I get so many mills from the Scheiren and the Scream. And now Hafner's Chainlink 1, Meta Noise Chainlink 2, adding back the Tier Cache, so I can make a Kid Carlos. And now I'm already in a pretty solid position against the Yubel deck. So Kid Carlos here, and my opponent hits me with an Imperm, which is kinda rough because Imperm on Kid Carlos is the biggest choke point for this deck. And now I also can't go for the effect of Kid Carlos to take out, so I have to go into Esprit Knight using the Garura. And with Garura as link material, I can chain block the Esprit Knight against the Phantom of Yubel. And I really want to banish the Yama here, because without Yama the escape of the Unchained becomes dead. And then I go into Kid Carlos, trying to bait out the Phantom. My opponent doesn't fall for the bait, but I chain Superpoly and fuse my own monsters into Rukalos. And here I summoned Rukalos in defense to avoid the Nightmare Pain battle damage, because 2500 defense is less than the 3000 attack. And now I get to mill 5 cards. And I milled a Salik and a Trivikama early in the combo, so I can go for the Trivikama, search the Heartbeat. And now I have Heartbeat, Kid Carlos, SP against their follow-up. And they decide to start with the Spirit Gates. So Spirit Gates, searching here, but the search doesn't really matter for me. What really matters is the effective special summon from the graveyard. And here on the summon I get 3 Scream Mills. I mill the Fairy Tale Snow, which could become really important later. And then on the Spirit Gates, chaining 2 Rukalos, chaining 3 Heartbeat. And by using my chainlinks in this way, I do not have to send the Scream on my side of the field, because I can send the Heartbeat for the Rukalos effect. And now Heartbeat discarded the Hafnes, so Hafnes is threatening to fusion summon during the opponent's turn, and for this reason my opponent decides to use Phantom of Yubel on that. And then making a second Phantom, and now my opponent is going for the Sprite Elf here. I chain my Esprit Knight to remove the Sprite Elf and break the protection that Sprite Elf gives to Phantom of Yubel, and then chaining 3 Modora, shuffling back the target, and now my opponent won't be able to revive the Rage, which is really good for me. And now Battle Phase, attacking into Rukalos, but Rukalos is in defense and Nightmare Pain is gone, so I won't take any battle damage. And now in my draw phase, Fairy Tale Snow. And my opponent is forced to chain the Phantom of Yubel here if my opponent wants to use the Phantom effect, otherwise the Fairy Tale Snow will be chain blocked against the Phantom of Yubel. But my opponent chained Maxx C here, which is a little bit unfortunate, because now I have to find a line that threatens lethal while playing around the top deck Spirit of Yubel. So Fairy Tale Snow is going to book the Phantom of Yubel, and then I normal summon a Tree Clown. And with those 2 level 4 I go into Lugaris, and then Lugaris can revive my own Kid Carlos. And the Kid Carlos effect triggers whenever she is summoned, not only on a fusion summon. So Kid Carlos chaining 1, Tree Clown chaining 2 just to play around a potential Ash Blossom. And now Kid Carlos taking out into Tier Cache. And again we want to go for Kid Carlos chaining 1, Tier Cache chaining 2, to mill 8 cards in total. And let's hope that we can mill a Destrudo here, because with Destrudo we can go into Baron de Fleur, and with Baron and Rukalos combined we can go for lethal under Spirit of Yubel, which could be a top deck by Maxx C. And here I also milled a Hafnes, but I was extremely low on time, so I decided to not use the Hafnes effect, but I should have used the Hafnes effect, put back my Esprit Knight into the extra deck, and then make a Mud Dragon and Tree Clown into Abyss Dweller. And with Abyss Dweller and Rukalos I can go for lethal, even if my opponent top decks a Spirit of Yubel under the Maxx C. And for the next replay, I have another game where I had to go second against Yubel, and I want to use this game as an example to discuss a very important question, and the question is, Should you play turn 0 with your engine hand traps like Havnis and Tear Cache? And the answer is, it really depends on the matchup and on the rest of your hand. Let's talk about the matchup, and there are some decks that may end on unbreakable boards if you don't interrupt them at all, and one example for that would be Yubel, because you won't be able to break the Yubel board with Appaloosa, Rage, Phantom and Escape of the Unchained with the hand we currently have. So we have to play on turn 0 here, and another consideration for playing on turn 0 would be, do we have other cards in our hand to support playing on turn 0? And that would be other tier cards that we can send for Reinoheart, just in case we mill a Reinoheart. And here we had Meta Noise and Scream in our hand that we were able to send for the Reinoheart to make Kaleidoheart during the opponent's turn, shuffle back the Dark Beckoning Beast and turn skip the Yubel player. And now we have Scream, Grief, and that should be game against Yubel. So in general, when the opponent is threatening to make an unbreakable board and when you have tier engine cards in your hand to support a milled Reinoheart, then you should play on turn 0. And here we have another game against Voiceless Voice, and Voiceless Voice may be a little bit harder than Snake or Fire King sometimes, but it's easier than Yubel in general. Because your engine board breakers like Superpoly and Droplet work against the deck, you can also force out the interruptions with talents or punish them for using the interruptions early. And here my opponent went for Skull Guardian, low, and then searching the Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. And then second ritual summon for the Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. And now my opponent has at least 2 spell negates, but I have only 1 spell. So I need to think how I want to bait out the spell negates, and I start with the Scream, then normal summon Reinoheart, chaining 1 Scream, chaining to Reinoheart, chain blocking against the spell negate, and then milling Havnis. And here I was trying to bait out the Skull Guardian negate, but my opponent doesn't negate the Havnis with the Skull Guardian. Instead, my opponent decides to drop Effect Veiler on the Kid Carlos. And with Veiler in the hand to answer my Kid Carlos, not negating the Havnis with the Skull Guardian is perfectly reasonable here. And now I need to go for Foolish, but with 3 cards in the hand, it's possible that I have a second spell, so my opponent decided to not negate the Foolish here. So I go for Reinoheart, and then searching Scheiren after discarding the Salik. And now going for the Scheiren. My opponent still doesn't want to negate anything here, so I mill into Trickclown, and Trickclown is another body. And now it's time to go into SP Little Knight. And the SP summon makes me take effect damage from the Odd Eyes, but I appreciate taking effect damage because this will make my Psychic End Punisher bigger. And then SP gets negated by the Skull Guardian, so finally I baited out the Skull Guardian. But in general, if the opponent goes for the Odd Eyes, it's better for you because it's easier to force out the Odd Eyes than forcing out the Zeravis negate. And here we have the Strudo in the hand again as final extender, and I absolutely want to resolve my Prima Donna line here. So it's really important for me to bait out the Skull Guardian first and a potential Zeravis if the opponent ends on Zeravis. Maybe you can force out the Zeravis with SP, and I think most people will negate your SP with Zeravis, but maybe that may change in the future. And here we go into Kaleidoheart, spinning back the follow-up, and now after we remove the follow-up we go into Psychic End Punisher. And then End Punisher makes us take more effect damage, and then we banish our own Kaleidoheart and the low from the opponent, which is going to debuff the Skull Guardian. And now battle phase, one punch the opponent with End Punisher. But if you can't OTK the opponent with End Punisher, then just camping on the End Punisher as a towers may also be a reasonable game plan. And then if you want to use Psychic End Punisher as a towers against Voiceless Voice, you can use the effect of Psychic End Punisher during the opponent's battle phase again. If the opponent wants to crash into End Punisher to create a life points difference, then your Psychic End Punisher is going to pump up to 12k attack first, and even with a 4100 attack Skull Guardian, the opponent may take 8000 battle damage, and the opponent is just going to kill themselves when they want to attack to create a life points difference and remove the unaffected effect. And that means the opponent is basically forced to summon Underworld Goddess using the Psychic End Punisher as material, assuming the opponent has Underworld Goddess in the extra deck. And if the opponent doesn't have Underworld Goddess in the extra deck, that means you win. If the opponent has Underworld Goddess in the extra deck, then the opponent needs to go all in, waste all of the resources just to out the End Punisher, and then you may still win if you top deck your Reinoheart because the opponent has no resources left and just one Underworld Goddess in the end board, which you should be able to beat with just normal summon Reinoheart. And that would be another way how you could win against Voiceless Voice if you fail to OTK the deck. And finally, let's talk about Tearlaments deck building. And I want to start with the questions that people ask me the most about my list. So first of all, why do you play 2 Simara and 3 Grief? And the answer for that is pretty simple. I want to draw my starters as often as possible and I want to be able to play the game as often as possible. Because playing the game is always better than not playing the game. And when I see lists with only 1 Simara, that means those people have only 6 1-card starters. And with 6 1-card starters we have only a 57% chance to play the game. And with the second Simara I have already a 6% higher chance to play the game. And now when we take Foolish Burial and Grief as 1.5 card combos into consideration, then the people with only 1 Mara, 1 Foolish Burial and 1 Grief have only 69% chance to draw their combo going first. Which is not good enough.
Bruh.
That means in 7 out of 10 games they will be able to play the game and in 3 out of 10 games they won't be able to play the game. And I like to play 2 Simara and 3 Grief, that means I have 7 1-card starters and 4 1.5 card combos. So a combined total of 11 cards that are either a 1-card starter or a 1.5 card starter. And now I have an 82% chance to play the game. That means in more than 8 out of 10 games I will be able to play the game. Which is much better compared to 69% chance. And now let's talk about another issue. Some people ask me why I decide to not play Ash Blossom or Caught by the Grave against Maxx C from the opponent. And my answer for that would be, why on earth would you deck build against Maxx C, because your deck is already pretty strong against Maxx C. You have to focus on cards that deal with Maxx C and break the opponent's board on top of that. And those cards would be Talents, Droplet or Superpoly. And Ash Blossom in this deck is completely pointless because even if you can negate the Maxx C from the opponent, you still lose against Imperm or Veiler on Kid Carlos, which is much more threatening than the Maxx C itself. And when we look at the maps for Maxx C, then we see Maxx C has only a 33% chance to be in the opponent's top 5. However, when we compare it with Imperm and Veiler, and both of them combined have a 57% chance to be in the opponent's hand. That means in 6 out of 10 games we would lose against Imperm or Veiler even when we have the Ash Blossom against Maxx C. So Imperm and Veiler are much bigger threats than the Maxx C, and Imperm and Veiler will occur in 6 out of 10 games, while the Maxx C will only occur in 3 out of 10 games. And are you stupid? Can't you do the maths? Why on earth would you deck build against a card that comes up in only 3 out of 10 games when there are more threatening cards that come up in 6 out of 10 games? And why on earth do you not want to deck build against a threat that comes up much more often in 6 out of 10 games, with Maxx C coming up in only 3 out of 10 games? Can't you do the maths? And now when we compare the maths for Maxx C with the maths for either Imperm or Veiler, then we see that it makes absolutely no sense at all to deck build against Maxx C by throwing in some useless cards like Ash Blossom or Caught by the Grave. And on the other hand, my deck is built to beat the hand traps that come up much more often than the Maxx C itself. And when we look at the most popular cards in Master Duel, Imperm and Veiler have a much higher combined usage than the Maxx C. So from a mathematical perspective, we should absolutely focus on the cards which have a much higher combined usage than the Maxx C. And those are Imperm and Veiler. And now when we look at the maths for the cards that beat Imperm or Veiler on Kid Carlos, then with only 1 Foolish Burial Goods and 1 Grief in the deck, we have only a 90.23% chance to draw one of them, which is absolutely pathetic. And now, when we do the maths for my deck, then we see that my deck has a 35.35% chance to draw one of those, which is almost double the probability of drawing one of those cards when you play only 1 Foolish Burial Goods and 1 Grief. So Grief is your best extender in this deck, and the only extender in this deck that allows you to play true Imperm on Kid Carlos, which is the biggest choke point for this deck. And Imperm on Kid is much more scary than the Maxx C itself because we cannot even punish the Imperm with cards like Talents. So from a mathematical perspective, it doesn't make any sense to play less copies, and I have no idea why some people still choose to not play the mathematical optimal deck when we have such useful tools like the probability calculator, which clearly tells us that a deck with 3 Grief is much better than a deck with only 1 Grief in beating Imperm on Kid Carlos. Okay, let's move to the next discussion point, and that will be the Black Goat Gloves. Some people are really convinced that this card is extremely good in tier, and my opinion is, Black Goat is kinda meh. And one problem is that the Foolish Burial Goods is only at 1, it means we cannot rely on Foolish Burial Goods with the Black Goat Gloves as a board breaker against decks that add on Appaloosa or IP. It would be much more reasonable to consider the Black Goat Gloves in combination with Foolish Burial Goods as a board breaker for going second if we have more than 1 copy of Foolish Burial Goods. But in Master Duel, this is not the case. And my second issue with Black Goat in the current Master Duel format is that this card doesn't feel that amazing against the most popular meta decks. And currently, the most popular decks are Tenpai Dragon, Snacker Fire King, Magnamhut, White Forest, Voiceless Voice, Labyrinth, Infernable and Yubel. And let's be honest, from those decks, Yubel will be the only deck that consistently puts an Appaloosa on the end board, which would be a card that requires Black Goat Gloves to shut down the Appaloosa. Other decks don't put up an end board where Black Gold Gloves is really a board breaker going second against them, nor does Black Gold Gloves interrupt them seriously going first. So Snake a Fire King can probably play true Black Gold Gloves going first, Maverick can do it, probably White Forest too, and it seems like Voiceless Voice and Tenpai Dragon might be only decks where the Black Gold Gloves interrupts them seriously. However, I can tell you from the perspective of a Tenpai Dragon player right now, that several 2-card Tenpai Dragon combos beat the Black Gold Gloves. So for example, Pydra with Summoning or Kaiman beats the Black Gold Gloves, Pydra and Chandra beats the Black Gold Gloves, and in general there are probably some other combos that also beat the Black Gold Gloves, and there might be some other Tenpai Dragon combos that can make Transcendent Dragon in the main phase 1 and then Kaiman in the battle phase and OTK you through the Black Gold Gloves. And with the Transcendent Dragon, which has 3k, Biden Dragon, which has 2.6k, Fadra, which has 1.6 and can summon the Chandra from the graveyard, is already 8700 damage. And then the deck can still go with the Fadra into Trident Dragon lines and put up 30k damage under the effect of Black Gold Gloves. So from my perspective, the Black Gold Gloves doesn't seem good enough against the current meta. And if you still want to main deck the Black Gold Gloves, the next question would be which card of the deck should you take out? And the most obvious card for the Black Gold Gloves would be one of the other traps, either Meta Noise or Crime. And I tested this deck with the Black Gold Gloves over Crime and the Black Gold Gloves over Meta Noise, and I came to the conclusion that the Black Gold Gloves isn't really that much better than one of the tier traps. Sometimes, for example, when you play against Spiceless Centurion, you absolutely want to have the Crime in your deck, because Crime allows you to add back your banished tier girls, and Meta Noise is just a really nice endboard piece if you accidentally milled your Sullik during the combo. And sometimes you want to end with the Meta Noise over Sullik or with Crime over Sullik, especially against Boardbreaker Tenpai when they force you to go first and don't draw a single hand trap. Or if you play against 60, then trying to end on Crime is also a reasonable approach. And for this reason, I like Crime in the deck and I prefer Crime over the Black Gold in the deck. The next part, when discussing deck building, would be should you play Maxx C? And my answer is obviously yes. Because when we look at the most popular decks in the meta right now, let's look at the Master 1 only decks. Then we see that the majority of decks are pretty vulnerable against Maxx C, and only Tenpai Dragon, Voiceless Voice and Labyrinth would be the exception, while 3 out of 4 decks seem pretty vulnerable against Maxx C. And some people may argue, Tenpai Dragon is the most popular deck, it has 30.66% popularity, that's absolutely cap, and you should always deck build the mathematically most optimal deck. And the mathematically most optimal choice would be to main deck Maxx C against the 8.6 out of 10 decks that are not Tenpai Dragon. Only reasonable counter argument against Maxx C would be that most of the decks run 3 Ash, 2 Called by the Grave and 1 Crossroad Designator against Maxx C, so Maxx C may resolve only half of the times. And for this reason, the tier deck should rather play more board breakers, for example a third Talents, a third Superpoly or a third Dropland. And I can kinda go along with this reasoning, but this would be the only serious argument to cut Maxx C from the main deck, and over-respecting Tenpai hard enough to not main deck Maxx C is just cap, this deck doesn't have enough usage to justify that. And now let's move to the extra deck. So the first question is, how important is Deep Sea Primadonna? I think you saw it in my replays that Primadonna is absolutely a game changer for this deck, and unfortunately at the Worlds tournament not that many people played the Primadonna in extra deck, and I feel like this card became only really popular after Worlds. And I don't get it why, because this card is so broken going second. You can always make the End Punisher with just one level 4 monster, it doesn't have to be a level 4. You can just normal summon the Maxx C, use this Trudeau, get into Primadonna, use the Primadonna to get into your Kid Colors and other tier fusions, and then go for End Punisher and one punch the opponent with just any monster that you can normal summon and the Destrudo. And for this reason I really like to play 2 Destrudo, because 1 Destrudo feels extremely high roll and inconsistent, and I always want to see Destrudo in either my opening hand or my mills when I go first or second, because going first I want to use this card to make a Rendezvous. Going second, I want to go for Primadonna or Psychic End Punisher if I want to play around Nip on the Primadonna. The second Destrudo was the most important card within the cards that I milled after resolving Kid Carlos, and all of the other cards were basically meaningless without Destrudo. But I lost also some games where I milled 10, 13, 16 cards and didn't see a single Destrudo in my hand or in my mills, so I had to go for Dugaris, draw 2, discard 1. And then I didn't saw this Destrudo, and then I lost because of that after digging through 80 cards, basically half of my deck, and still not seeing the Destrudo, which is just really unfortunate at this point. And I really hate it to be unfortunate and not seeing the Destrudo, so I really want to play a second Destrudo. And the final cards in the extra deck I want to discuss are Dweller and Skycrashers. I think both of them are flex spots, but they are pretty nice to have. So for example, if you go first against a 60 card deck, then you can always make Blind Dweller, and those decks are very likely playing grass, and the Dweller shuts down every single card they could mill with the grass. so they just lose if you go first against them. But also going second against Fire King or Yubel this card can be pretty nice. So if you play against Fire King, any 2 level 4 monsters threaten Dweller, and the opponent is forced to use the interruptions to prevent you from setting up Abyss Dweller, because if you resolve Dweller, most of the Fire King interruptions became basically useless. And against Yubel, if you can't go for Rukalos plus Baronne Fleur combined to beat Maxx C plus a top tick Spirit of Yubel, then you have to go for Abyss Dweller, because Abyss Dweller can shut down the float effect of Spirit of Yubel in the graveyard and make your OTK go through a Maxx C and Spirit of Yubel. And I think it's obvious that this card is amazing in the team mirror, so there are a couple of good reasons to play Abyss Dweller, but it's a flex spot and you could play something else if you don't have the ultra rare crafts to play Dweller. For example, Underworld Goddess or IP Masquerena. And the same with Sky Crisis. I had a couple of games where this card came up. I played countless games during the Duelist Cup, and my observation is that Sky Crisis was a difference in like 3 out of 100 games. So I really like Sky Crisis in my deck. I think it's a reasonable decision when you have flex spots in the extra deck. And some people really want to throw Dragoon in every possible deck, which is absolutely incorrect in my opinion, because you have to play 2 main deck bricks just to make Dragoon work. But the majority of decks in the current format have already a pretty solid endboard going first, so Dragoon is absolutely not needed on top of the endboard. But you still have to play with 2 main deck bricks, and playing with 2 main deck bricks just for a slightly stronger endboard is absolutely not worth those additional bricks. But if you struggle against Dragoon, then you may try out Sky Crisis, because this card can bounce back the Dragoon and the opponent cannot respond with the Dragoon effect, because the Dragoon has more than 3000 attack. And the bounce doesn't charge it, which bypasses the protection that Dragoon has. And I know that a couple of other people really like to play Zeus in a tier extra deck, but I have 2 main issues why I'm not the greatest fan of Zeus in tier, and those issues are first of all that Zeus kinda contradicts with my game plan, because my game plan is to OTK the opponent going second with the End Punisher, and if I cannot OTK the opponent with End Punisher, then I would probably have to go for a grind game, and I really like to use cards like Baronne Fleur to do that, so that I end up with Baronne Fleur plus maybe a Rukalos or a Kaleidoheart combined with Salik in my endboard after I break the board of the opponent, and Zeus doesn't fit into this game plan. Because either I decide to not use the Baronne negate and keep the Baronne Omni negate live during my opponent's turn, or I use the Baronne negate when trying to break the board and then tag out with Baronne into a card like Fenrir during the opponent's standby phase. That means when I want to resolve the Zeus, I would have to get rid of my own Baronne Fleur or my own Fenrir, and this doesn't seem that great. And my second issue with Zeus is that this card pretty rarely comes up, because most of the times I want to go for the Dugaris draw 2 discard 1 to dig into this Trudeau, or use Dugaris to pump up my own Psychic End Punisher to lethal the opponent when it's not lethal yet. And sometimes I make redraw, but with the only purpose of attaching Scheiren for card effect to fusion summon Kaleidoheart or Rukalos. And when I make Abyss Dweller, then most of the times I really like to keep Abyss Dweller on a board for my opponent's turn, because Dweller will be also a floodgate after breaking the board. So game states where making Zeus would be really beneficial really rarely come up, and this is the reason why I say to cut the card even when I had the Zeus in my extra deck. Which I like to play over IP Masquerena, because you can do pretty nice combos with the cross shape. So for example with cross shape and Rukalos and Salik on the board, you can use either the Salik first to send the Rukalos and then Rukalos summon herself back in the zone cross shape points to, and then with the cross shape we get into Reinoheart, we can make Kaleidoheart, and then we can use the Rukalos or the Salik, whichever we haven't used yet, to send the Kaleidoheart, and Kaleidoheart can send a tier name to make Register Pelliot during the opponent's turn using the Rukalos. And also having Kaleidoheart plus Salik is really nice to follow up, because most of the decks can't deal with a Kaleidoheart coming back every single turn and spinning 1 card from the opponent every single turn. And then during our next turn we can use Kaleidoheart to get into Kid Carlos again, and then we should win this game from this position. So Cross Sheep gives you a slightly better follow-up than IP into SP, and I also think Kaleidoheart and Register combined are better interruptions than IP into SP. Sometimes you might want to have the SP in your endboard to reset your own Baronne Fleur, but you can just summon SP directly without using the IP to go into SP. But in general, I think that having 1 Link 2 to climb with any free monsters into SP Little Knight to get the SP Little Knight banish is really helpful, so you should probably play at least 1 Link 2 just to get the SP banish on summon life. And that's it for my extra deck, but as I said, the extra deck is pretty customizable and you can play whatever cards you want, whatever cards come up the most amount of times for you. And some people really like to play 60 card tier, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm a huge defender of 40 card tier in Master Duel. I don't like 60 card piles for a couple of reasons, but that would be a major discussion point by itself, and I don't want to make this video too long. It's already over 1 hour, and I will make a second video where I want to talk about the implications of 60 cards on the maps compared to a 40 card tier build. But that's it for this video. If you think I've missed anything important, let me know in the comment section. See you in the next video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, have a nice day, bye!